Hello everybody and welcome back to another Doctor Who vinyl record review. In today's review I'm going to be taking a look at one of the latest Demon Music Group record releases, which is of the first Doctor 1960s serial, The Massacre, one of the missing Doctor Who stories that is in fact the Record Store Day exclusive for 2020. Due to this release being a Record Store Day exclusive, I naturally recommend purchasing from your local record retailers as opposed to the online shopping giants. Most of the record stores have put their remaining stock online, unlike in previous years where you would actually need to travel to store. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it has been made a little bit easier to obtain these records this year round. However, stock is also available at a more expensive price from the likes of Amazon and no doubt also eBay as well. This release is a limited edition, and some of the previous Record Store Day exclusive releases have become quite rare and collectible in recent years, so this is definitely one for the collectors. This 4-part First Doctor serial is split across 2 LPs with one story on each side. The format is the same to the usual, featuring the original television soundtrack broadcast on the BBC back in the 1960s. However, some of the more visual sequences have been replaced with linking narration by Peter Purves, so you get a better understanding of the story overall. So taking a look at the cover art for Doctor Who The Massacre, it is absolutely beautiful, a really lovely design, and of course follows a rather similar theme to some of the previous releases as a part of this series, the likes of the Daleks' Master Plan, the Web Planet, the Evil of the Daleks, the Abominable Snowmen, and this is a rather unusual cover because in all of the stories that I've just mentioned, you have the likes of the Yeti, the Zarbi, the Daleks. You have some rather iconic shapes and creations that Doctor Who is known for. The Massacre is a pure historical, and as a result, it's an episode that doesn't have an iconic monster. And to be honest, the vast majority of this cover art doesn't really look very Doctor Who-y. Of course, the only clue that we have that this is a Doctor Who story is a very small inclusion of the TARDIS exterior box down here within the archway, which is the same style of box that has been used on a number of the previous record releases as a part of this series. The rest of it is completely relishing in that pure historical format. Of course, we have the location of historical France, with this lovely architecture in the background, and of course the flame torches coming up the side of the archway, and the light from these torches is reflecting across the entirety of the artwork. I really glow behind the TARDIS, and then this is hitting off the main character here at the very front as he's wielding his sword and looking to what is essentially the grim death surrounding him, a number of bodies on the floor and somebody who is about to be stabbed. It's all very delightful in France during this time period, which of course if you've listened to the story you will know this episode is very grim indeed. Another lovely inclusion is we also have the Notre Dame there, the silhouette of that in the background, including the 2 iconic bell towers, as well as a number of different spires going up into the sky of France. And then of course above this you have Doctor Who The Massacre. The Doctor Who logo has been printed in a lovely embossed silver style, and the BBC logo with original BBC TV soundtrack at the very bottom. So yes, I absolutely love this cover art. I think that it has some lovely details, in particular on this clothing down here, the inclusion of the feather, but I also love the additional silhouettes in the background, really evoking the grim style of this period, and of course the ripped French flag up there as well. It's one of those things that the longer you look at it, the more little small details that you spot, and I like the fact that it doesn't include the Doctor and Stephen. It makes this product a little bit different, and something that stands out compared to some of the previous Massacre media. As always, the LP does also come with a sticker that is fixed onto the cellophane. Naturally, when you take this off, it is rather hard to keep, sometimes even trim around the edges to keep the label, because I'm a sad git like that. It says Vinyl Who, the classic 1966 story, completed on vinyl for the first ever time. It is, of course, 2 180-gram heavyweight vinyls, and it is the Parisian Blaze vinyl variant, and it is a lost story. So that's a really lovely inclusion. And it also states there at the very bottom that it is a Record Store Day 2020 exclusive. Flipping around to the back of the record sleeve, we have a more familiar sci-fi piece of artwork, including the time vortex in the very background, including this orange and yellow swirl to evoke the same colour palette as the front of the cover art. Of course, this vortex, as well as the TARDIS exterior, have been used as a part of all the previous artworks released as a part of this series. In the bottom corner, we also have a few additional bits of company information, stating that The Massacre is written by John Luca Rotti, who did of course write a number of pure historical episodes from this time period. It stars William Hartnell, and the linking narration is by Peter Purves. As we open up the double LP, we are greeted by this lovely shooting star design, which has also been used on the previous releases. A lovely touch is that they've used the same colour palette to that of the front cover artwork, and this is also represented within the text in the very middle as well. The top of the LP states the title of the episode once more, as well as stating that it was first broadcast on the BBC between the 5th and 26th of February 1966. And then as we move to the opposite corner, we also have a number of production credits, both for the 1960s serial, but also this 2020 vinyl record release. And as always, the centre of the double LP does feature the full cast list for all 4 parts of this serial. I must admit, as much as I don't mind this design choice, I think it would be really lovely to have some images from the actual episode itself. Of course, in the case of this story, the only existing photos are a number of publicity images, but also a few telesnaps from the story. I think it would be lovely to maybe have a few around the side, almost acting as a trim, just to kind of show what the episode would have looked like had it still existed today. And hopefully, eventually, it might even be returned to the BBC archive. But I think it would be lovely to have some pictures in there just to make the inside of the artwork seem a little bit more interesting, and of course with it being on the inside of the sleeve, it doesn't take away from the overall design of the front cover. The sleeves of this record once again follow the same format that we come to expect from the Demon Music Group, and as always it is really lovely. On one side we have the inclusion of the TARDIS exterior box flying in space, and I love the way that we have this orange coming from the centre, and this even continues onto the opposite side of the record, creating a really lovely pattern. On the opposite side of the sleeve we have a few additional production details, stating that side A features episode 1 and side B features episode 2, then of course the second vinyl features parts 3 and parts 4, also presenting the date that it aired on the BBC, as well as a few additional production details, also stating once more the entirety of the cast. Finally, we move on to the actual record itself, the main event, and as always, Demon Music Group have done an incredible job. One of my personal favourite things about these products is what weird and wacky colours Demon Music Group are going to throw into the mix to make these LPs, and this time round, as the label suggests, we have a Parisian blaze to represent the climax of the story, and as always with LPs, the design will vary, as you will see in a second. This is the second LP, and we have, from what I understand, is meant to be the normal design, where we have an orange centre there in the very middle, and then this lovely swirl coming around the side with a number of different flecks. Then as we head towards the side of the record, it's a lovely clear design, then of course the same on the opposite side as well. And then of course we move on to the second record, which is an ever so slightly different design, completely unintentional. It just depends how the colours mix together when they create the LP when it is pressed. This time round we have a primarily orange design, as we can see in the middle here. It is pretty much entirely orange, and then as we fade out towards the sides it goes ever so slightly yellow. Then even up the top here we have a few flared designs, really creating that sense of a flame. So yes, really lovely, lots of lovely dots in there as well. It's a very pretty design, I absolutely love it. The arrival of the TARDIS in Paris, France in 1572 places its occupants, the First Doctor and Stephen, in a dangerous situation. Tensions between the Protestants and Catholics are at fever pitch within the city. However, despite this, the First Doctor decides to head off into the darkness of the night in order to meet a familiar face, being Charles Breslin, leaving Stephen to track him down for the rest of the story's duration. This story is of course also known as the debut of Jackie Lane as Dodo Chaplet, the First Doctor's companion, who infamously doesn't stick around for too long. This episode is of course also known as the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, however for the vast majority of releases is shortened to simply just the Massacre. Much like a number of serials from the first and second Doctor era, the Massacre is sadly missing in its visual entirety from the BBC TV archive. It's one I had never experienced prior to the release of this record and knew very little about, other than the fact that it was a pure historical. This is the first pure historical released as a part of the Demon Music Group series, with of course Marco Polo soon to be released in the future. And in fact this is the first ever pure historical story where I've needed to rely on the original television soundtrack with the accompaniment of the loose cannon reconstruction. And something that I've realised is that for me personally, experiencing missing historicals is more challenging, as you don't have the big lumbering monster to be the centre of the action, and in particular for the Massacre, it's a very character-driven story, hopping between different plots to kill certain people in the rising tensions of 1500s France. Due to it taking place in the later end of the First Doctor era, there's also a lot more reliance on the companion of Stephen, with Hartnell taking a back seat, but oddly also playing both the Doctor as well as the Abbot. His deteriorating health at this point within the series leaves Peter Purves to drive the story forward, so it's a great adventure to show the strengths of his character. Admittedly, this story will not be for everybody, being very dialogue heavy. I needed the visual aid of the loose cannon to follow the plot, and even then, it's a story that you can't exactly zone in and out of, without easily missing key points of the script and developments with different characters. I've heard the target novelisation is in fact rather different to the televised story, so I look forward to reading it in the near future, and possibly even comparing the two at a later date in another review. And with that does of course conclude my review of the Record Store Day 2020 exclusive of the First Doctor 1960s serial The Massacre, as written by John Le Carrotti. Overall, this is a really lovely product, and if you've got some of the previous Doctor Who Demon Music Group releases, you know exactly what to expect. The presentation and the artwork overall is absolutely beautiful. However, as always with this series, I certainly recommend it more so to fans of the era, but also people who like to collect Doctor Who records. As for the actual episode itself, The Massacre is one of those Doctor Who serials that I actually would like to do a little bit more of an in-detailed review of at a later date, possibly even comparing to the target novelisation, so who knows, that may come at some point in the near future. However, of course, one of the main problems with this format is that at the end of the day, this is an original television soundtrack for a story that was originally intended to be watched as opposed to listened to. Therefore, you won't have some of those key bits of dialogue in there that you would come to expect from the likes of a Big Finish audio drama that are meant to describe the surroundings, meaning that this is one of those releases that you need to pay a lot of attention to in order to fully understand, but it's still a rather fun story, as well as being quite dark at the same time. So thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week, and of course on that note, I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.